Hello, and welcome to the Manifestor Only podcast. Today, I have Catherine, a 4-6 ego manifested manifester. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
And am I saying your name right? Because you have like an extra E in there. Catherine.
Yes, you are saying my name right.
Okay, good.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I want to
Catherine with a
get right.
C. The important clarification is that it's Catherine with a C, not a K.
Yes, yes. And
The
with
superior way. Sorry, just kidding to all the Catherines with Ks out there. I'm kidding.
I'm so glad to have you here today. And I would love for you to start us off by just introducing yourself in the way that feels most natural to you.
Yeah. So, hello, I'm Catherine, 4-6 ego manifester. Um, in just a limbo state of life. So I think I'm just gonna introduce myself in that way. I'm very into just being a human right now, and I'm showing up as that.
That's beautiful. I think that's what we all need to do. And you are my roof buddy, but you're a 4-6, where I'm 6-2. And so I would love for us to just start this conversation on a little bit of an easy topic because I know we're going to go into some really deep shit, but maybe not that easy. You're pre-Saturn return, you're on the roof, and I would love to hear it from your perspective. You know, that sixth line being in the body,
Mm.
how has it been for you in that process of going up on the roof?
Yeah. Well, the physical manifestation of that process was a lot. I'll start with a quote. Okay, so this is a quote from my favorite 4-6 right now. I just like observing other 4-6s. And I've got like 3 or 4 and then a 6-2 sprinkled in there here and there that I just like watch. And anyone who looks at anything I post knows that I love the 1975. It's my favorite band. Lead singer Matty Healy is a 4-6. We're around the same age. Like I'm just, and his very public 4-6 arc so far has just been fascinating for me. And one of the things he's been quoted saying is especially when he's talking about his atheism, he says, and I don't know if people can see me, so I'll describe the action I'm doing, but he said that he used to be an atheist, right? And like he kind of bundled up his fists and like started fighting the camera, and now he's more of like a atheist where he leans back. And I just thought I saw that interview and I thought it was so brilliant of a way to like encapsulate what that 4-6 transition feels like, because I wouldn't say it about atheism in myself, but there's a lot of things that I used to be like, I'll fucking fight you about it, you know? And now I'm just like, okay, I still believe the same things, but I'm not gonna fight you. Like, it's fine. Um, and for me, it's just been, I don't want to say I don't care, because I don't care is not the right word. And I think maybe that's what I thought aloof was prior to the proverbial climb up here. But it's more of just like, I don't even think about it. Like, it doesn't cross my mind anymore. It used to be not something that I had to prove all of my crusades, if you will. It's not that I had to prove anything, but it just doesn't externally inspire me anymore. It more like is redirecting me to do other things in my life. I don't know if I'm explaining this right. It's so hard to articulate.
Mm.
Um, but like my energy has just, the way my fourth line needs to take action or needs to show up or needs to share things, it just looks very different. And it's more about me. I feel like the pre-30 life, at least for me, I was searching for the thing that I felt was missing in me in my external world. But then I was getting feedback from my external world that was like validating the thing that was missing, which caused me to like fight more. And now it's like, oh, actually, the, I'm still experiencing the same thing, but instead of like continuing that toxic feedback loop of like searching externally, I'm now just like, oh, okay, let me go over here. Like, let me just remove myself entirely and go to the thing that is actually giving me the thing that I need, instead of like forcing something that's not giving me what I need to give me what I need. Um, so that's like the internal world of it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Externally, it was broken bones and crazy body things and my whole life falling apart and my Saturn's in the second house. I broke, debt, like just anything you name it. Um, all of the crazy mundane, like I don't want to say bullshit because we live in the real world, so the real world is very important, but like it's so easy to get caught up in that you miss the higher aspect of it, or the real lesson of it. Um, it's been rough though. Like I won't lie. I won't lie. There's a lot of people that I feel like I have followed that I don't want to say they romanticized or glamorized the roof process, but they didn't share it. They just shared the like beauty of it, I
Mhm.
guess, in a way, or they made it look aesthetically pleasing, but like no one was talking about the literal demons that were like unearthed and fighting me. And I mean, there's like some parts where I like reflect back on how I was showing up. I'm like, ooh, that was ugly. Like that was an actual demon. I don't know what that was. That was not you. But it just feels like a thrashing. And I'm not really, well, I shouldn't say I'm not really thrashing anymore. I definitely am still a little bit. But the thrashing is less with the world and it's more with myself.
Mhm.
And I'll leave it at that because I don't know if any of that made sense, but it made sense to me.
It does. No, I hear you. It is a messy, complicated, intense process. I'm 39 now, but I, as a 6'2", was forcing that third line life. I mean, mentally did not want to let go. And it wasn't until I was 34 where I finally was just like, I have to stop. I have to stop moving. I have to stop being this fucking manifesting generator. I burnt down my coffee shop, which I've mentioned on a couple of these podcast episodes. And I was also left with, I mean, the amount of debt I went on the roof with, holy fucking shit. I mean, outrageous. And it was, it wasn't until I was 34 where I finally was like, I have to surrender to this thing that I'm not wanting to see, this change that I'm not wanting to go through. And it's not pretty. It's not.
Mm-mm.
And I think, I've had a lot of conversations with six lines, both 4-6 and 6-2 and 6-3 and all the wonderful six lines out there, but it's confusing. And I think a lot of people think, and like you said, there is a lot of romanticizing of, oh, you get to just, go on the roof and lick your wounds and integrate wisdom and become this beautiful girl. And it's like,
It's like an actual exorcism, though. Like, you
yes,
know what we're talking about.
exorcism is the perfect word for it.
It's not, yeah. There's no real education about it. Hmm.
Yeah. But I think that's great because this is really what I'm hoping that this podcast can bring is the openness of this shit ain't easy. We go into this human design thing and a lot of people like to believe that all of it is beautiful and cozy and nice. And then it's like, oh shit, no, this is like radically self responsibility and honesty and really looking at yourself in a different way.
Hmm.
And yeah.
And it often like falls apart. Like, oftentimes, at least I found, right? The more I step into, I don't even want to say step into alignment, because I truly think that the people that live their life without any knowledge of human design are actually more in alignment with their human design than the people that are aware of human design. Like, I guarantee, I can't remember, once you come into it, it's hard to remember like what you were doing before. But I feel like the second I learned about human design and my authority, I almost like forgot how to do it naturally. And I think that's the beauty of the system, right? Is that just by interacting with the system, you, in a lot of ways, are just interacting and living from your not self. depending on who you are. Um, so in a lot of ways, things fall apart pretty hard. Like no matter whether you're a sixth line or not, I think there is there are a lot of people, and this is typical of anyone in any industry, right? This is just typical of the internet. There are a lot of people sharing highlight reels everywhere. And I find that the people that are fundamentally interacting with human design in an embodied way, things actually fall apart for them a little bit. And it doesn't become this like, it's not glamorous at all. It's hard to romanticize it. And that doesn't really sell.
It's not sexy.
Right? Like you're not self-sells.
Yeah.
So all the people, the loudest voices in the room that are like, oh, these, insert rage at influencer human design here. Not self-sells, baby. I don't know what to tell you. It's just, that's how it's always been, regardless of whether the human design label is attached to it or not.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think when I hear someone say they have overcome the not self, or when I used to be not self,
That's not a thing.
it's not a thing. I'm just like, even Raw, let's go to Raw for fuck's sake. Even Raw
The
said,
most not selfiest of them all, by the way.
well, that too, definitely. But he even said, I'm in my third cycle of deconditioning. He never said, oh, I'm done. I'm over it. There's parts where he's like, I am not self and I need to love it. That's not quoting him, but that's what I've been hearing when I've heard those lectures where he will talk about the not self. And I think it's absolutely dangerous to tell someone that they will overcome the not self.
Yeah, there's no such thing. I mean, you look at any of the systems that human design was built off of, right? And the fundamental core truth of it is that there is always suffering. And to me, like, that's the world I came to human design from. I like at the start was like, I'm big, like Buddhist beliefs, right? Like I studied for years at this one center. I went through all of their warriorship trainings, like whatever you name it, I've done it. And that was kind of the foundation that my whole life was built off of. And then I got into astrology and other things. But like my primary belief system is that of with its roots in Buddhism. But no matter where you look, like the whole overarching theme is that there's always suffering. You can't escape the suffering, right? So to me, the not self, that is that horizontal comparison of suffering. And like, regardless, if you follow the gene keys, you know that there's the shadow and the gift and the city, and regardless of how long you go, your shadows are still your shadows. They just look different the older you get and the more aware you become. They become harder to notice, or they show up in like more mundane different ways, but they're still there and they never go away.
Yeah, it's like they transmute into something different.
New level, new devil.
Yes.
I like to call it.
That's one of my favorite sayings. I say that all the time. New level, new devil. You think you're done, and then it's just like, boom. No, you're not.
Yep. And it's often when you say you're done that life's like, no.
Let me show you.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking a big game. Let me knock you down a little bit.
Mentioning gene keys, that really wants me to go towards this whole pop HD versus dogmatic HD. And I know you have a lot to say about that. So I'm just going to leave that for you.
I'm going to practice what I said in the beginning of I used to be an atheist and now I'm an atheist. I used to be, and like, I used to crusade hard against the critiques of pop HD. And now I'm just like, I spend so much time out of the quote unquote community and like off the internet. Like I really truly feel like I have disappeared in a lot of ways, which was intentional. And every time I pop back on, it's usually because someone is messaging me about the same conversation that's been happening for the last like however many years. And so at this point, I'm just like, oh my God, like people still have nothing better to talk about. This is crazy. Um, I just think that here's what I'll say. Human design was created, it was born in the energy of a manifestor, meaning it was not finished when it was initiated into the world. It is meaning it is never finished. And I think that's like, maybe I can speak for all manifestors here, probably not, but at least for myself, when I think about, there are things that I've truly created in the essence of manifestor energy that I've not put out into the world because I'm afraid of what will happen once I do, because I can't control the narrative anymore. Right? As soon as I put it out there, I can't control what people do with it. And I also know that because I'm a manifestor, it is meant to be taken and run with by others. Like I'm not supposed to take it and run with it. I'm just supposed to be like, here, I did this thing, have fun. Um, and so I just want to remind everyone, like, that is the energy that human design came into the world in. So to sit here and say that like Ra's truth is the definitive truth is to essentially be like, accept this first draft as final word. Um, to me, it just defeats the whole purpose of the system itself. And if someone truly believes in what they teach, right, then it would be okay to have spin-offs of the system. Now, I think there's a fine line because there are some things that I see that would probably fall into the category of pop HD that are just like fundamentally wrong. Um, so I think there's definitely a line of like, this is the way the system is taught, right? You can't change your type. I I I'm sorry, like if you have a spleen defined, you are splenic, regardless of if you have a motor attached to it, you're you're splenic. Or the same thing with like, I don't know, like I've been told by like some manifesting generators, like, well, I'm more of a manifester. I'm like, nope, you still have a sacral center though. You still have a sacral center. There are fundamental things that are right. So there is a black and white area. But I also think that I'm of the belief that human design should be in the real world, that the real world systems work, right? Corporate structure, government, whatever you name it, would fundamentally benefit from the system. And so if I am to assist in that overall mission, right? If I am to like carry out my little piece of the puzzle, I have to interact with people that might not necessarily be where I'm at. And so if Pop HD is what is needed to reach people where they're at before they branch off and go discover the next thing and keep chasing the rabbit hole, then like Pop HD is needed.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is an accessible language to someone who, quite frankly, might not access Ra's language or the dogmatic community, if you will. I'm using quotation marks if people can't see me. The dogmatic community, like there is a level of elitism with that. And I truly believe like the language used to describe human design is maybe not intentional, but it does keep people out. It does scare certain groups of people away. It is not accessible to everyone. And so to me, like Pop HD is one. How do you take a structure so vast and so deep and universalize it for a 30-second bite-sized clip on Instagram? Like, obviously, you're going to lose nuance. But two, like, not everyone can grasp the higher concepts. Not everyone wants to grasp. You could spend your entire life just doing strategy and authority. Quite frankly, I think you should. Like, and that's all someone needs. I just think, who are we to control? Like, if we're all here for the same reason, thinking that the world will benefit from it and everyone needs to follow it, or everyone needs to know about it. I shouldn't say everyone needs to follow it. Everyone needs to know about it. Like, who are we to control how that information gets to that person? If everyone is an individual and has individual ways of learning and understanding and moving through the world, then like there should be individual ways of teaching the system and talking about the system. Like that individual expression is needed in order to reach all the people that it needs to reach. And that's, yeah. So I don't really think pop age, like, I don't understand that. Like, and also like the world sucks and is hard. Give me mind candy all day long. Like, I don't want to think too deeply anymore sometimes. You know, if I think too deeply, I make myself sad because of how shitty the world is. Like, give me mind candy. It's delicious.
Yes. I think I really appreciate what you were saying here, because it is not up to us or anybody to judge how they find human design. And I also agree there's a fine line between taking the system and just totally, like, I've seen people talk about the root center as an awareness center. I'm like, no, that's not actually true. That's not what it is. I would love to hear people's, explanation and experience with the different gates of the pressure center, root center, but it's not an awareness, right? And so I saw someone who was talking about gate 39 as an awareness around provoking, and I'm like, nah, no, this is where you're kind of going over that line of making shit up. But hearing someone take what is fundamentally in the box and saying, oh, but you know what, I know how I can reframe this in a way, or how I can speak to this in a different way. Yes, please. Because no, as much as I love Raw, I'm one of the people that do absolutely get his. I mean, I'm a 4323 as well. I get the humor. I get the dark humor. I get the hyperbolism that he brings to the table. And then, of course, he's shocking. And I think that's amazing. I love that. And not everybody does. Like, I remember my husband's a 1-3 manifesting generator. And to your point of people who don't know human design are just living their design, he's one of them. And it's there's days where I'm just like, that's so outrageously insane. How do you do that? But I remember we were in the car, and we were going to be in the car for a long time. We were driving to Greece. We were going to live in Greece for 3 months, and we were on our way to, a 5-day drive down to Greece. And I'm like, oh, let's put on the generator signature, whatever lecture. And I put it on, and he's, he has the 28, and he has, he has the 38, the 39, and the 43. He has all the death gates. And he's an individual. And so if it doesn't ring, and he's also narrow valleys, like there's so much fucking sound shit going on. And he was just deaf to Raw. He's like, yeah. I can't do this. I cannot hear a word of what he's saying. It's not going in. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can explain it in a different way if you would like. Yes, please. Can't you just tell me what he's saying? Because I don't get it.
Yeah.
And that's great, because that's what his way of learning. And that's what I'm thinking a lot of people are. And so if they need to hear it from, and I'm not going to drop names, but anybody who we see as pop HD, and what is pop? It's popularized, right? It's like, can we not be grateful that someone is popularizing this beautiful system so that people can actually come to it? I don't get the hate. I really don't. And when people hate on Gene Keys, that just pisses me off.
I don't know how you hate on Gene Keys. That's like, I don't even think about gates anymore. It's human design, and the gates are Gene Keys. Like, they're the same thing to me.
Great. I mean, I've never done any of the sequences, which I bet are brilliant. I just haven't been drawn to do them. I would love to hear you. Have you done the sequences?
I've not like maybe done it in a, I don't know. I've learned them, right? I've learned them. I've studied them. I've not done a formal program or like long-term contemplation on them, but I do see where they show up in my life. And there's some that I play with more than others. For me, like I just always focus on my incarnation cross. Like, when in doubt, it's my incarnation cross always. And I do a lot of ritualistic work with my incarnation cross. And like my Godhead, and I don't follow the Godhead according, like that is the one thing where I listened to Ra. I studied it from like Ra's perspective, and I was like, no, fundamentally disagree. And I do my own thing. And I will play with my pearl. My pearl is always my go-to. Like when in doubt, I go back to my pearl. But I've not done anything formal. But I honestly, when you focus on your incarnation cross, the rest of it kind of just happens. But I do love the Gene Keys. Big
Yeah,
fan.
me too. I understood. And I think it's also just like I'm an emotional manifester and I'm a 1222. I'm like, fuck, give me the romance. Give
Mm.
me the romance. And I find Richard Rudd brings the romance and the softness and the beauty and just that passion that Raw with his mechanical substructure doesn't, or that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It's just like he's mechanical. It's just this is the way it is. And
It's
then
his fifth line for me. It's just so pokey. I'm like, just relax a minute. Just chill out.
too practical, too practical.
I know.
I
Tell
need
me
that.
something else.
Oh, I love the romance of the Gene Keys, and I've learned
Mm.
so much about the Gates through learning about the Gene Keys. And I think, like I said, I have not studied the Gene Keys in the way, but I use the Gene Keys to understand the Gates. So, like you said, for me, it's like a human design gate is a Gene Key gate. That's just the way it is for me.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's a misunderstanding where people think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people think that Gene Keys has a purpose of you overcoming the shadow. Is that, do you find that to be true or?
Do I think that is the purpose? No.
Mhm.
Do I find that that is a popular thought? Yes. I think that just goes back into the whole like not self to the conversation about overcoming your not self, right? Um and even just our fundamental human, again, going back to this idea of suffering, like everything we do is to avoid suffering and alleviate suffering, but like what if that never goes away? Like how do you change your behavior with the understanding that no matter what you do, you'll never alleviate suffering, right? And to me, that is the gift in the Gene Keys. It's like no matter what you do, you're always going to swing on this pendulum of shadow and city. You're always going to have highs. You're always going to have lows. You're always going to be triggered. Like, so the gift is the nugget of wisdom that comes out of that swirl. The gift is like, okay, no matter what I do, I'm never going to get it 100% right. So, but I will get this. Um, and to me, it's like, even that is a mental manipulation of it, right? Like you can't control. You can, I'm sorry, but you cannot control your shadows. I'm fully convinced that the more you are embodied in human design, actually the less control you have over it. Um, and all you can do is have awareness of like, oh, I'm in that place again. And then you can lean into the quote unquote gift or the city, or quite frankly, literally anything else. I don't even think you have to get like the exact opposite and have that gene key studied so perfectly that you know the energy to lean into next. Just like do something different, just disrupt the pattern, and like that will find its way to you is the belief I hold. I do think, yeah, I do think that there is a and quite frankly, I think everyone comes to this opinion on their own. Like if you think about, this was said to me, who said this to me? I think Kelsey said this to me. Kelsey Rose.
Talked to her yesterday.
Oh, I saw your stories. Yeah, that's so one day we were talking and we were having this conversation about how like when you first learn human design, you kind of follow the profile archetypes. Um, and I feel like it's the same way when you decondition, right? Like so that line one is so mental. It's so mental and people get stuck in that a little bit, I think. Um, and so to me, this need to overcome is a very mental, like, I have to get it right. I have to figure out what I need to do to overcome it. And then I have to do the things all the time to overcome it. But like leading into that line two would just be like, okay, I'm aware of it. Let me just keep living my life with the awareness of it. Right. Line three is like, oh, here's what happens when I'm aware. Here's what happens when I'm not. Um, line 4 would be bringing it into a more conscious, intentional, one-to-one interaction, right? Showing up in your day-to-day life, showing up with people with presence and awareness. I don't know. It, to me, yeah, I do think that people get stuck in that. I don't think that's the purpose of it. And again, like, I actually feel like the more embodied you are, the like exact opposite of what you think is going to happen will happen, which is kind of the point.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I want to take the conversation over to, you talked about focusing on your incarnation cross, and I find the cross of rulership to be fascinating. And I would love to hear your experience with being a cross of rulership, and what are these rituals that you do, or yeah, tell me.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would love to hear why you think it's fascinating, because I feel like people say that to me a lot, and I don't know if I understand why.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I boiled it down to this. When we're looking at the tribal channels, I'm like the fucking peasant. I have the 1949. And so I'm like at the bottom there, right? I'm like, I'm only focused on these basic needs of sex, religion, and food. This is what I've got. But then you go up to the 45 and it's the fucking queen. And it's this royal energy of having the resources, that big mama energy of that bear hug. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to fix this, or not fix this, but I'm going to help you with whatever it is, because I want you to, I want you to be a part of this. And I think there might be some envy there going on for me. I have nothing of the 45-21. And so that's, of course, a learning channel for me as I grow and understand, but also something that I haven't figured out yet, but something that is very interesting to me is that from my Saturn return through my Uranus opposition and all the way to my Chiron, the 45-21 follows me. And so I feel like for me, it's just this yearning to like, what is this? What is this? Because it's a part of that, that what is it? Mar explains it as like a costume that I put on with my Saturn, my Uranus, and my Chiron. And so for me, it's just like trying to figure it out, trying to understand it. But then the cross of rulership, just in general, I feel like that energy is so potent. And, another thing that we're going to step into a little bit later is how you've, well, I mean, we've already talked a little bit about this whole pop HD thing, but how people have come at you, talked about things when you've said things. And I feel like that's a little bit because of that queen, royalty, power. Is this making sense?
It is making sense. And I have talked with other writing across of rulership people about just the fact that, like, for some reason we are so triggering, but most of us are like, we genuinely don't understand why. And I've watched other writing across of rulership people go through similar, like in the public eye, go through similar things. And it's always the person, the writing across of rulership owner, right, is always like, I don't understand why you're like, what is going on? Because it's so funny, like you have that perception of it. But if you asked me if I felt like that, the answer's no. Like, absolutely not. I would say that I hold like a dream, right? To be able to say, like, yes, look at this, look what I've built, look what all I have, let me share it. And I am very much that way with my friends and my family. Like, what's mine is yours, and oh, don't worry about it. Like, I bought tickets for my mom and I to go see a concert tomorrow, and then I forgot she was out of town. And so I was going to go, but then I'm so tired. I was like, I was going to take her friend. So then I just texted her friend and I was like, hey, like, do you and your husband just want these tickets? Cause I am just, so much is going on. I can't go. But I don't want them to go to waste. And, they're like, well, what do we owe you? I'm like, nothing. Like, I already bought them. Like, don't worry about it. And that to me is so, I don't know if that's the 45-21 in me, or if it's the writing across rulership, or it's a combination of both, but it's just like, just take it. I don't care. Like, I'm not worried about that. That's, to your point, right? Like the 1949, like, to me, that's not like, I don't like the word peasant, but like, to me, that's so trivial. Like, that's what I'll say. Like, basic, like, whatever, not important. Just go have fun. We'll deal with it later. Versus maybe you would be like, yeah, you owe me like $90. I don't know. Whatever. But um, you know, and in retrospect, sometimes I'm like, man, maybe I should have taken the money for it. But like it's just not at the end of the day really what I'm thinking about. Um, however, I would say that what you don't see with and this is where I think the trigger comes from. Most radical cross of rulership people give off the air of unbothered.
Mm.
I think that's the 2247, right? That's like, and depending on where it is in their chart, it could be stronger. It could be more of an aloof. Like for me, it's in my unconscious. So, um, it might seem like things come easy to me, or I don't actually know how I'm perceived. So that's, it'll be really interesting to ask people how they interpret this or how they view it in me. But like some people with it consciously, right? They're just so cool, calm, and collected all the time, or peace and love and whatever. But internally, right, it's not always like that. And often I find that right angle cross of rulership people, and this is why I'm taking out all of the horrible things that have happened, why I'm so obsessed with Kanye West. And I will always be a fan of Kanye West. I could talk about Kanye West forever. He is a classic right angle rulership example. His mother died. Big right angle cross of rulership, like explosion. And for us, it's always about how you handle yourself when life happens to you. When I first learned about being right angle cross of rulership, it was like, you're here to own land. And I was like, this is actually the last thing I want. Okay. You're here to be the CEO. Also, doing that now, not really quite the CEO, but like on the leadership track now, not necessarily sure I want that. You know, like all these things I thought, all these vanity things that I thought I wanted, all these 3D, like tangible things that can be taken away that I thought I wanted. What I actually know that I want now is like, I just want to be able to be comfortable. I just want to be able to like be okay when something inevitably happens to me. Because as a right angle cross a rulership, something is always going to fucking happen to me. Because it's about that proverbial kingdom, right? Is like an internal thing that, okay, yeah, it turns external, but you have got to have the internal first. And also, like, as we can see through Kanye, right? He's got the external kingdom, but he doesn't have that internal kingdom. And like, look what it turns into. Um, his mother died, and that was like the thing, like, he's had no, what's the in the Gene Keys, the fourth placement. It's your purpose, but there's like also another word, core stability. He's of no core stability sense. 47 is his core stability. He's constantly blaming literally anyone and everything. He's a no core stability sense. And to me, that is like right angle cross of rulership 101. Like I just want someone to like anchor him back down and he'll sort himself out, you know? Um, and so like the people that Amanda Francis, another public example, 4-6 right angle cross of rulership that I love, she is a classic example of like she appears to be unfazed, right? Even when her baby died, like Grace out her every pore of her body. I guarantee that was not like the internal life she was living. I guarantee there were demons and exorcisms happening. Like that was her rooftop. Um, but you don't see it because that is like the true beauty and the gift of that incarnation is the grace and the example in which we can flow through hard shit, and also how we can help other people flow through hard shit. And I think that's the triggering part for people. I don't know why.
It makes sense to my defined option over here. Oh gosh, yeah, I've got goosebumps from top to toe while you're talking about that. I think that's a beautiful way to explain it. And I think, you
Like
know,
for me, there's always a lesson. Like anytime something bad happens, I'm like, okay, what's the lesson? Like I've just got to get the lesson out of it. And then I can like do my little, I'm still gonna be mad about it, right? Like for me, if anytime I lash out or I blame or my consciousness is 4526. So I'm like, I'm the shit. And how dare you not recognize me? And let me go get what I want from somewhere else. As I'm saying this now, I'm thinking about a moment right now in my current existence where I'm doing this and I've been completely blind to it. Right. Like, that's what it looks like for me. And I need to lean back into, okay, it is what it is. It is what it is. What am I gonna like? I've got to control my own part of the kingdom, right? I've got to just, other people are going to do what they're going to do. I got to go do what I need to do. And I will, every single time I've done that and trust it will work out, I've not been let down since. So,
Yeah.
and maybe it's the not being let down part that triggers other people because other people see that and they're like, why can't I have that? And I'm like, but I guess you can. But also, like, if you knew what I went through, you might not want it. I don't know.
Yeah. That gave 47.6. So my incarnation cross is the cross of informing. And so I'm a 2247 in my conscious.
So you have the 6th line there too. It's
Yeah.
a fun one.
Fucking futility, bitch. Ah. It
Yeah.
is. It's a hard motherfucking shit to have. It is. And it's like you said, though, it's like we have to go through all of this hard shit because the way I see it, at least, is like, okay, I'm going through this so that I can have grace for someone else.
Mm.
Right. And it's like, because then I can have that experience to share when someone else is going through that, or someone else needs that impact from me, or someone needs that support from me. And it's not easy. And that's conscious for me, right? So it's my conscious earth. And it's definitely that leaning into factor of like, yeah, life is going to always serve me fucking lemons.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to make lemonade with it? Or what am I going to do?
Right. And that futility is like, it can go in two ways. Everything's pointless. Why even try? Or everything's pointless. What am I going to do about it?
Why not try?
Right.
Exactly.
Nothing matters anyway. So might as well do what I want.
And maybe also just like real life moment reflection here. Maybe that's also why I'm so drawn to understanding the right cross of rulership, because I have half of that incarnation cross. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have the other half. I have 26, but I don't have that 45. So
Yeah.
interesting.
It definitely is helpful, I think. And I definitely hold guilt and shame a little bit. It's helpful to have the incarnation cross when the world is on fire. Um, it really is like I'll, especially that. And I've been thinking about, they say with 26, you like only remember positive things. It's like positive memory recall. Like you kind of don't remember your failures, so you can keep going after it or kind of just rolls off your back. I always think about that because I don't quite understand what it means, but um, even like in today's, literally look anywhere you want, in especially in the US, like I'm always grappling with that like desire to stay informed versus like have peace of mind and sanity. Um, and my tribalness comes out where it's like it's really important to be informed. There's a collective lesson here that we all need to learn, blah, whatever. Um, but I'm also like, what can I do about it? And it helps me like continue on in life and keep trying, because I think maybe if I didn't have that, maybe I wouldn't. Um, but it also, I think, makes me deaf to other people, right? Like this idea of, I don't get why people just don't try. I don't get that whole Nike just do it. But maybe that's a little bit of my ego definition too. But like, I have to always remember that like not everyone else is running across the rulership. And like, to me, I'm like, well, you have no other choice. Like, just you got to keep going. Um, but not everyone feels that way. Not everyone has that access to that energy, I suppose. So maybe like you say, I'm going through these things so I can have grace for other people. And I'm trying to think of how that would look on a sick, like the opposite energy, all unconscious. And it's like, maybe I need to, I don't need to go through these things so I can be the example to other people, but by going through these things, I am the peace for other people, or I have the potential to be the peace and hope for other people, which also means I have the potential to be like triggering for other people who maybe aren't necessarily ready to realize that they have more control in a situation than they think they do. Or maybe it's, I just need to, maybe it's not about other people at all. And it's just for myself. Like everything I go through is just a reminder to have grace for myself.
Right angle cross.
Right. Or maybe it's both.
Yeah.
Double transpersonal, who knows? Um, Yeah, it's definitely it's a lot deep. I would encourage anyone with writing across a rulership to not read the incarnation cross descriptions from Ra. That's the one thing I would encourage you to not do. I would encourage you to look at your gene keys and break it apart holistically. And this is kind of tapping into my ritualistic side. Look at it in terms of the quarter. So like what I do is I work with every like we're in quarter 2 right now. So I'm working with my 45, which means I'm working more with my authority. I bring my Godhead into it. So the Godhead for this quarter for me is Lakshmi. I've got a little statue of her on my altar, and I do like things, rituals to myself, right, that honor her. I know that in traditional human design, the Godhead is like the thing to avoid or the thing to not be. But to me, it's like, no, this is like an actual deity that shows up for me that I can invite into my space and work with and ask her to show me, right? Like, I think that's, and they all come through differently. Like, quarter 1 of the year is always Kali, and I've told many a story of all that, like, she's come to me in dreams and how she showed up me through my like whole Saturn return, just completely demolishing things and also demolishing me. Even the other week, so I just went to Red Rocks. Oh my God, this is a funny story actually. So I went to Red Rocks for a concert, and I I don't like out, I'm not like a big outdoors person. So I feel like I would love Colorado and live in Colorado if I was into outdoors. It was very beautiful. And I was with my friend who's like this ultra runner. She lives in Utah. So she's got like super blood and super lungs. Like girl can do anything. Meanwhile, I am a manifestor, fat, from the East Coast where we don't have elevation. I'm like gasping for my life. Like on this hike, just heaving my undefined sacral up the side of a mountain is already hard in and of itself. Um, so we went for one day to hike and then the next to kind of scope out where the concert was. But then the next day I was like, there's just genuinely no way that like I can make this hike again into the amphitheater. So my friend who lives out there, but like was like, okay, here's how you like if you show up early, you can get this parking lot. But it's kind of like a joke with the locals that you have to earn the concert. Like the mountain gods or whatever, you have to earn the concert. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So we go, we get early, we tailgate, we don't have to hike the mountain to get in. We just have to like walk up the stairs. All is well. We get 6 seats right down front, seeing Trevor Hall, my one of my favorite artists. Like just it's my birthday, like such a good day. I do shrooms, like whatever. So then he closes the set with one of his new songs, which I don't know if you're not familiar with Trevor Hall. Like he's Hindu, and so a lot of his music has like Hinduism in it. And so he finished the set with this new song that he wrote, which is like a prayer to Kali. And I'm sitting here on my birthday, and I know like she shows up for me hard. I work with her a lot, and so I'm just sitting there like, oh, this is so poignant and special. But if you know anything about Kali, she's kind of the trickster, and if you ask her for things, she'll give you a lesson instead. Like you don't call on her. Um, so we go to leave, we take the exit closest to us, and we find ourselves all the way at the bottom of the mountain. And we have to hike all the way back up to get to our.
No way.
I'm not kidding. I was sitting there, I'm like, mother. It was, first of all, I don't want to do that hike again. Second of all, it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm on shrooms. Like, I don't want to hike. And third of all, I'm sitting here like, calling her, like, like here I was, like, asking, praying to you, asking you for things or this whole song, and you're like, okay, earn it. It's so funny. So like that's how I invite the Godhead in, and I work like quarterly, right? But even then, like it's not Kali's quarter and she's still showing up. Um so I find that, I guess, to tie it all back, because I got off on this tangent and now I've lost my train of thought here. Um your incarnation cross is a lot deeper than you think it is. I'll leave it there.
Yes. It kind of makes me want to go read. I used Chetan Parkin's book.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. Have
Do
you?
recommend that one.
Okay. Because just for people listening, like, well, where should I read about it if I shouldn't read about Raw or read it from Raw? I really love Chetan Parkin's Book of Destinies. Yeah.
Very good one. Very good one. And then just take it gate by gate. Like, this is the gate, this is the gene key. How does it interact in your chart, right? Like, for your incarnation cross might be a part of your authority. It might be a part of something else. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
again, like, this is my biggest thing. And I always say it, like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Just just learn, just absorb everything and piece it all together, and always ask yourself, like, how does this show up for me in my life? What does this look like for me, right? What does peace look like for me? Peace as a manifestor for me is so different, probably peace as a manifestor for you, right? The rooftop essentially is the same thing, but like our Saturn returns probably looked drastically different. Having a defined ego looks different to everyone. I can't stress it enough. Like, what does this look like for me is a simple hack.
Yeah. I think that's such an important message. And I hope everybody like go back 30 seconds and listen to that, because we talk about like the defined ego, and you have a heavily defined ego, right? You have 3 gates and one of them has at least 2 placements. So like at least 4 activations in there. And we talk about the defined ego like, oh, well, this person has self-confidence and they have this and that. And, they're here to thrive on the material plane. And it's like, well, okay, that's all that, mumble jumble jargon bullshit shit. But what does it feel like for you? Like your conditioning might have created a person who doesn't feel self-confident. I know people who have defined egos who absolutely are not confident. Like there's something wrong with me. I did something wrong. I mean, of course, there's a defined ego can never understand what it's like to be an undefined ego, and an undefined ego can never understand what it's like to be a defined ego, but it's different. Mm-hmm. It is so important for that is the whole experiment. It's like, what is it for you? Mm-hmm. And I think, I've probably mentioned this on so many podcasts, and excuse me for anybody who's listening to every single episode if I've repeated myself, but that is one of my main goals with this podcast is the science of differentiation, motherfuckers. Yeah. Can't forget that. And it gets lost very often. It's like, well, I'm an ego manifestor. I'm part of the, 0.8% or 1% of the population with this, manifestor and ego authority. Mm-hmm.
We're also different though. Like
also different.
Even okay, yeah, I'm a part of the 0.8% or whatever. Like somehow I have so many ego manifestors in my life, like in my real life, which is crazy. Like I just collect them. But we are all so different. I have a friend in real life that is a 4/6 right angle cross of rulership ego manifestor. She was born in March. I was born in June. Like on paper, I even know someone that's my birthday twin. We're an hour apart. We could not be any more different. We have fundamental threads, right? We think similarly, but we come to different conclusions about things, which is fascinating to me. And so again, it's like even talking with someone who has the same exact chart as me, except for the line placement of their moon, we have different interpretations of our own chart, and our chart shows up differently for us. And like, we'll talk about it and we're like, I'll say, oh, it's interesting. It doesn't come like, I don't see it that way, but I'm like taking something away from how you're seeing it. And so important to be able to have those if we can't have those conversations, we're missing the whole point.
Mm-hmm. I'm very glad I have 3 different ego manifestors that are going to be on this podcast. So,
that's so fun.
Yeah. I have a 6/2, a 4/6, and a 1/3. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah. Now, I want to take the conversation to a different angle here, because one of the things where you have been very open on your stories on Instagram, at least, is about mental health and human design.
Yes.
So yeah, you want to just start off and tell us your story?
Yeah, I mean, where do I even start? So part of my Saturn return was returning to, right? I really did feel like I was living like my early 20s all over again in a lot of ways. Um, Now I think which is another, again, going back to the gene keys, that's another thing. Like, I can feel myself going back in time through my Venus sequence, which is kind of crazy. I feel like I went to like Pearl and now I'm working my way backwards. I haven't fully formed a thought or a thesis about what I'm experiencing, but it is something I'm noticing. So in my Saturn return, it really felt like I was reliving my early 20s. Um, and now I feel like I'm kind of in my teenage middle school years, like really hardcore with my inner 13-year-old. I'll probably be here for a while with her. But early 20s, I was I'll just give you the whole story. So I was in college. I went to school in New York City. Moved away when I was 18 to New York, and Leo the late bloomer, right? Like true classic 4/6. I kind of like came into my own in my early 20s. Childhood, I was always like, everyone always loved me, but everyone always put like high expectations on me. Again, classic young 6 line moment. I was always made the example of, right? Like I could make the same mistake, but I was always punished harder. I was always like the like, don't do this, don't be like this, right? Um, and then I kind of left the bubble that I was raised in and got away from the, I don't even want to say the voices, but like just got away from the people that kind of raised me and informed me and went to the city and just for the first time was able to do what I wanted, be who I wanted and explore that undefined G-centeredness of myself, right? Because I kind of take on the vibe of my environment. Um, and so I'd always dealt with like, I don't even want to say moods because it's never like a low or like I rarely get true depression. I've had like 3 true depressive episodes in my life. But for me, like what I now am diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and so like my mania, if you will, is always been anger. Always been anger. Um Mixed in with some other things, but I have always had that thread of just like true irrational anger, which you could say is a manifestor trait. Like, I don't know, you know? Um, so I came into my own in my 20s, was high stress, right? Like college. Um, and I lost like, if you will, my 4th line support system, right? That kind of mostly kept me even. Everyone just kind of put up with me. No one once said like, hey, maybe she should like go talk to someone, which is something I kind of sit with now. Like, why did no one notice that in me? Like, why did no one take care of me in that way? Um, I went to what my senior year in high school, I took AP psychology, and that's when the bug was planted in my head that I was like, we might have this. This might be a thing we deal with. But I kind of just never thought anything of it. But then I got to college, things started getting a lot harder. I think that was like when my first like true like depressive episode happened. I got really into like drugs, and partying, and that whole life had a little minor drug addiction moment that no one really knows about because I don't talk about it because I kind of like got myself out of it. There's certain things I don't touch anymore. Um, but that kind of set it all off and destabilized it. And then I was in like a really abusive relationship situation. Classic 4/6 moment in life. Who with a person who is also a 4/6. I tend to have these moments with actual 4/6s. Um. Anyway, long story short, like kind of put me in therapy, which then led me to this diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, which then my therapist was like, I don't really think that's true because we're working on the skills and you like the skills don't help the like cycle. And then my psychiatrist was like, yeah, actually, boom, bipolar 1 diagnosis. Um, I was also at this point, so when was I diagnosed? Like 21? Yeah, 21. Um, 21, 22. I left the city at 24. So I moved home, but like you can see, I'm kind of going through this like diagnosis and like the early stages of it, like literally while I'm about to get on the roof, because I don't care what anyone says, the rooftop starts that early, whether you realize it or not. Like it starts early, 24, 25, 26. You're gearing up for it. You'll start to get tastes of it. The Saturn return, I should say, not the roof, the Saturn return. Um, so I like kind of, it was a part of my return was like, okay, I have this diagnosis. I was on medication. It was going great. And then I found human design. Or no, that was what got my spirituality started. Because my therapist was like, you should try meditation. And I was like, okay, I've always wanted to do that. But for some reason, I was scared of it, which is so crazy to think about. Like, I was afraid to meditate. Um, and I think it's because I looked up Kundalini yoga on Google and it like some scary website was like, bad things can happen to you. And so I kind of just like, it's just so funny to me that that was a fear of mine. But I've also always found that I'm afraid of the things that have significantly changed my life. So that's an interesting thing to note. But anyway, found meditation, started going to the Buddhist, like my local Buddhist center, which is kind of how I got into everything that I touched upon previously. Really changed my life, really helped me. I moved home, continued down this path, but what happened was I moved home and I lost my, obviously couldn't keep my job. Remote work wasn't a thing at the time. So I lost my insurance. And because I lost my insurance, I went off one specific medication that I was on. And then that like classic thing that happens when you're bipolar and you're like stable, you're like, actually, I'm not crazy. Everything is fine. And like, so I was like, oh, I don't need that medication. It's totally okay. Like, I'm feeling great. And then the like great 6-year manic episode of my life happened, where I was completely off all my meds. And um, yeah, things just went a little wild. And it's kind of what brought me back to this revisiting of like maybe actually I am bipolar and I should do something about it is like I went back into the real world. So during this whole long manic episode of mine, right, I was like, I found human design. I did the thing where I was like, I'm just going to build a business and do my own thing and work part-time at like a coffee shop and work part-time at a computer store. And I had so much flexibility in my life. I was broke, which was very triggering for me, but I had so much flexibility in my life that like I actually could keep myself remotely stable. There was still the like delusional aspect that was happening. And I also had like really deep, it was just really intense. If you followed me up until 2022, right? Like you probably saw the intensity of it, which like was Saturn return, but was also very unmedicated mental illness. Um, not coping with the Saturn return very well at all. And so I went back into the real world, like, and I got a job, like a real job. And that was when I was like, oh, I don't have control over my schedule anymore, right? Like I can't just wake up at noon and like sit and meditate for like 5 hours because I feel bad. And like that allows me to interact with people in a normal way. That's also like not normal. Like I don't care what anyone says about like, oh, I just am, living my spiritual life and I'm a spiritual girly and I have time freedom. Like needing to do that is not, that's not normal. So I went, right. I had like my first like true, I had a really deep depression, really bad depression, at the beginning of 2022, whenever I had my ankle surgery. I think that was 2022, like leading up to that. And then like through my ankle surgery, really bad depression, which inspired me to like move. And I was trying to find a new job and I was like, couldn't find anything. So I just moved. Then I found a job, went back to the world, started not coping well in other ways. And so I was like, hey, it had started like I had started thinking about it again. And then I will give Kat Fitzgerald credit where credit is due. And I don't think I've ever said this to Kat Fitzgerald. So I will say it to Kat after we record. I bought a playlist from Kat.
Yeah.
And on that playlist, and Kat and I had not talked about this. On that playlist, there was a song from Next to Normal, which if you're not familiar with what Next to Normal is, it's a musical about this woman who has bipolar disorder. And there was the song in that show that I relate to the most. It's like this very rage-filled song. Like it's intense, like very rage-filled. And she put that at the end. And I was like, you don't know, I've been thinking about this again. Like, meanwhile, I had convinced myself because I had found human design. I'm not bipolar. I'm just a manifestor. No, you're both. So anyway, I went back on meds. It's been great. And it's been a whole lesson in also advocating for myself, right? Because I found my first psychiatrist back in the game, if you will, I found through someone in my friend group. My friend was like, I go to this office. I really like them. I ended up not getting put with like whoever her psychiatrist is, which was the little off part. So, and I didn't like him. So I was like, I just have to find someone else. I don't have insurance right now. She is so expensive, but it's been like a lesson like, hey, you need to do this, right? Out of all the things that we could be doing, like this is important to that inner kingdom, right? Yeah, you could redo the bathroom. Yeah, you could get a better car. Yeah, you could go on that vacation. Like all of those things I signify the kingdom, but the inner kingdom is more important. Um, but it's just been interesting to try and articulate how I'm feeling to someone, right, from that Western medicine perspective, if you will, with also holding the knowledge of human design, right? Like, how do I explain? And also, how do I know is my anger valid, or is this something deeper, right? Even like today, I was thinking before you and I met, and I kind of told you when we first got on Zoom, like you're kind of catching me in like a weird. I would typically try and reschedule in this type of mood, and but even before I was like, I've been feeling this way pretty consistently for like 4 or 5 days now. So, is this something I need to like be concerned about, or am I just tired? Um, and I hesitate to talk about it because I'm not a doctor, right? There's so much I don't know. And it is serious to me. Like I am of the belief that both things are true, right? Mental illness is real. It is very real. But also the Eastern perspective or the more indigenous perspective of, is mental illness just the way our minds categorize someone's ability to access something outside of the physical 3D realm? Like, because the things that happened to me in my like the great manic episode of my early 20s where I like kind of went off the rails for several years, um there were things that happened to me that were not real. There were definitely like I was not actually seeing Jesus in the corner of my room on a cross. Like that was not real at all, right? But there were other things that happened to me that were very real. Like I went off my meds and my psychic abilities kind of like broke through. Now I'm also on medication and I still have those abilities. So I've now ruled out the like, can you do both, right? I don't, it's so hard to explain because it makes me nervous because I never want anyone to hear me say something and then be like, oh, well, I'm struggling. So let me do what she's doing and like harm themselves further. But I do think that like, I don't necessarily know if it's what I hear sometimes people say, these certain things in our charts can indicate ADHD or autism. Like even I think Ra has said like something with fifth lines and autism, right? Like
I can't remember exactly what he says, but he speaks to certain aspects of design and autism. Yeah.
yeah, I swear it was fifth lines, but and it was like in the future. Like I remember reading like you're gonna see a lot more people like diagnosed with autism, which we could say is arbitrarily true. Whether it's a lot more people being diagnosed or people just like coming to terms, like now it's talked about, so people are going back and getting diagnosed. I don't know, but I wouldn't say that being a fifth line makes you autistic, right? But like being a fifth line or having autism and being a fifth line could contribute to how it shows up for you. And like the same thing with mental illness. I wouldn't say like certain placements give you ADHD, mean you're ADHD or mean you have. I see a lot of like, I follow a lot of celebrities with like, and I know we talked about this, like I have hanging gate 47. I follow a lot of celebrities with hanging gate 47 that also have a bipolar diagnosis and see how it shows up for them, right? Like, again, I'm always going to go back to Kanye West. Kanye's mania is blame, right? His ego is his mania. My ego is my mania. The whole thing where he's like, I am a god. Like, you know, we can say, okay, yeah, that's Kanye being manic. That's also Kanye being an ego writing across the rulership. Like, you know, um, but not grounded in reality. So, you know, we can say that people with schizophrenia are having hallucinations, or you can say that people with schizophrenia are seeing entities. For me, it always comes from like it doesn't matter what is right. It matters what allows you to function, right? And my big thing is like maybe I'm not bipolar, maybe I'm just a manifestor, but you know what? Like treating myself like I'm both allows me to show up in the real world, which is where I live. So like if the medication helps me function in the real world and I live in the real world, I'm going to treat the real world. Like yes, I know, okay, my mania looks like anger. My mania looks like um you know, staying up for like days working on something and creating something. My mania looks like talking a lot, right? A lot about nothing. You could say those are all just aspects of me being a manifester, right? But I also know that like a true manifestor urge and a manic episode feel different.
Yeah.
I sleep in a manifestor urge. It's sustained over time. I don't sleep when I'm manic, and I'm usually doing things that are not, you know, I sat on my floor and went through the tarot cards and like channeled all these meanings with the gene keys and like wrote a book. That was a manifestor urge. Me staying up and like listening to the whole Taylor Swift album because she was talking to me and she's actually my body double. And if I just do certain things, I can like actually like have her life instead. That's not that's not a manifestor episode. And so I can't believe I just admitted that publicly. That's so embarrassing. I remember I told someone I did that and they're like, you don't even like Taylor Swift. And I said, I know. That's why we know it was not normal. Um, and I just think that like the more I talk about it, the more I have people say, oh, you know, me too, but I don't need medication, or me too, but I don't think it's real. Like that's fine for you to believe. Maybe, or maybe it's not. But again, who am I? I'm not going to tell anyone how to live their life. But I know that I went through the whole pendulum swing of being like diagnosed, making it my identity. Poof, I'm not bipolar. I'm actually a psychic. I'm actually an alien from another realm. Like all of those little things. Like I created a whole course that I don't even sell anymore because I want to redo it because I realized the energy in which it was made into. Like it was made from a manic episode. And there's so many things I talk about that I actually just truly inherently don't believe. At one point in time, I did. Um, and then ever since I like got back on medication, I'm like, I should redo that. That's not actually like, I don't believe in that at all. And that's even interesting to think about because there were so many people when I made that course that were like, this is exactly what I need. And validating that like manifestor, like an impact, which continued to fuel what I thought was this, it like fueled the fire of like not necessarily the healthiest part of me, which I feel like is a whole other conversation we could go on about, like even circling back to the not self and the not self selves. But I don't want to call that not self because it is me. It's not my best self, but it is me. And I don't know, I feel like I've rambled on, so I'm going to stop and let you talk because I know you want to say things. I can see you. I can see you
I have things to
starting.
say.
So I'm going to just stop because I could keep rambling
Well,
forever, but it's directionless at this point. I told you
no, absolutely not. This is gorgeous. And at first I want to thank you so much for your honesty and openness, because
always.
human design or not, mental health is such, thankfully, is such a topic now, right? We're opening up for the fact that we have these minds and these brains that work so differently. And for anybody who has gate 47 sitting now and like, oh my God, am I bipolar? Well, let me tell you part of my story, right? So I have gate 47 as well, defined Ajna. And I've also been back and forth in, this medical system where they're trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I, on the other hand, did have intense depressive disorder moments, right?
Yeah.
I would get so depressed. It was outrageous. And from 18 until I'd say 20, maybe 21, I was diagnosed as bipolar and I was on the wrong medication. It was like absolutely gut-wrenching apathy where someone could come to me and say, your mom died, and I'd shrug. It was just like, not good. That was not good for me. And then they put me on all kinds of, pulling freaking things out of their hat, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But my doctor never sent me to get diagnosed with a psychiatrist. It was just my doctor that was trying to prove themselves in some way.
Like your actual primary doctor, not
Yes.
like interesting.
Well, and this is what happened, because then I moved and then I got a new doctor. And this doctor admitted to me, he said, and I'm disclaimers. I don't know if this is true, but this is what I heard. I am a 4323. I am not, but this is what I heard. Okay. But he said he is, and this is in Norway, of course, he is bound by law to test 3 different medications before he can send me to the psychiatrist.
But wouldn't the psychiatrist be the one to do the testing? Like, okay.
Not going to go into the conspiracy theories now, Jessica. But anyway.
Oh, are Big Pharma?
Yes.
Big Pharma? Yeah.
And so, but he said, fuck that shit. I see that what you need is someone to just give you all the tests, tell you what's going on. And by this time, I'm like 25. And so I'm completely off all medications. I had been on Lexapro, Effexor, Cipralex. I mean, all kinds of Remeron, just blah, blah, blah. The names I'm saying now might be European names, but still, it's just like all kinds of shit. And I get to the doctor and I tell him, or the psychiatrist, and I tell him, I said, hey, you can give me any diagnosis you want, but you can't give me ADHD, because it was such a branded as something you don't want, something that's not positive, something that's not, 20, I was 26. So this is 13 years ago. This is not when we loved ADHD on TikTok, Oh
yeah.
This is not when everybody was self-diagnosing with ADHD. Oh, right. And we do all these tests, and then I get back and I could see it all over his face. I just knew it.
Like, you have ADHD?
Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, I'm so sorry, Jessica. I'm so sorry. But there's no question out of all of these forms that you have and all the questions and all the things, it's just, you have ADHD. And I bawl and I'm like, I don't want this. Pretty much the same that happened when I found out I was a manifester. Like, I don't want this. Get this out. I don't want this. But then I, had to accept it. And what happened from there was that, the Norwegian system is pretty good. And so I got one-to-one therapy, I got group therapy, and I got art therapy. And it was like this whole program that I got. Yeah, I was
get that here.
right. Socialistic societies sometimes work, and all of this free. And it was one of those things where it was just like, I needed, and this happened in my Saturn return. I was 26. Mm-hmm. And I told him that I didn't want to start any drugs because I was getting married very shortly. And so I'm like, I don't know what this is going to do to me. So we went for 3 months knowing I was ADHD, because this was the summer. I was getting married in August, and I was just like, that's not going to happen. And he's like, okay, we'll wait till the fall. And then he puts me on Ritalin. Mm-hmm. And my life completely changed. I mean, it was night and fucking day. And by all means, what has happened now is that I have gone off the Ritalin. And so I have been for the past 7-10 years, something like that, off medication, because I did find things that could help me. But then again, I'm not having manic episodes where Taylor Swift is my body double. There's fucking
there's a lot of things you can do, right? And like,
yeah,
even my like whole off the rails moment in life, like I learned, like, had I not gone through that, and I guess maybe this is time even back into that whole like, I'm going through this so I can be graceful to other people. I'm going through this so I can be graceful to myself. Like, had I not gone through that, I would never have learned all of the like coping skills that I do have, right? And I would have never learned my threshold. And like, I had all those coping skills for so long, and they were servicing me for so long. But the second I got back into the real world, which could just be a larger conversation about how much our world is not built for manifestors or in just humanity, like how unnatural the human life is. The second I got back into the real world, my coping skills I wasn't coping. Not to say that I still won't use them. Like, I know, like bedtime, I'm so bad about it. I think that's like an eternal manifestor struggle too. Like, a lot of us are bad about bedtime, but like bedtime is so important for manifestors, and it is so important for people with bipolar disorder, right? Like, it's so funny. You said you were on Lexapro.
Yeah.
I'm also on Lexapro, but I was on too much Lexapro, which like shoots me into the sky. So I'm like so curious, like, that they had you on that, but that wasn't happening to you. Like, what was it doing? Was it
dead inside?
That's like, so interesting.
Nothing. I mean, and of course, the Ritalin, what that did as well was it took away the highs and the lows in a certain sense. But Lexapro was like, that's when someone could have come to me and told me my mom was dead, and I would have just said, okay.
Yeah. Which is obviously like, clearly you didn't have depression, because like that's an antidepressant. So if you were truly struggling with that, it would have made you feel something, probably. I imagine.
I would imagine too.
Yeah. For like bipolar, the reason why I'm asking is because like that's honestly the way there's no test for it. You can't test for it, right? They just give you an antidepressant, and then if you like manic episode, that's what will happen if you have bipolar. Like, it's like a thing, you cannot take regular antidepressants. So part of the reason why I switched my psychiatrist recently was because he put me on. I had gone back in and I had said, look, this is what I was diagnosed with in my early 20s. I want a re-diagnosis. Like, I kind of like gave him everything. And again, like a classic bipolar thing is like, am I really bipolar? Like, we all ask that question. So part of me was like, am I really? Like, let me get a second diagnosis. Let me re-diagnose. It's been 10 years, right? We're revisiting. I told him everything, and he was like, no, yes, you are. Sorry to burst your bubble. Here's 2 antidepressants. And I was like, okay, I don't know if that's a good idea, and then he just like wasn't listening to me after months and months of he's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm great. I'm doing this, and I'm going here, and I'm going there, and I've made all these plans, and I bought tickets to a concert in Colorado with no way of going, and I've spent all this money, and like, he's like, oh, great, I'm glad you're feeling better. And I'm like, I'm not sleeping, and I don't think something's right. Like, something feels off. Something doesn't feel right. And so anyway, I finally went, but like the first thing my new psychiatrist said, she's like, why are you so many antidepressants. I don't know. I stopped taking one of them. Just take me off all of them. I still am on the littlest bit of Lexapro, just the littlest bit, because I do have crazy anxiety and it helps with that. But, um, yeah. So that's so interesting that they like diagnosed you with that and then put you on that. And then like
For 3 years.
nothing happened. And like, it should have been an indicator.
Yeah. Yeah. For 3 years. And I don't know. My doctor had taken like,
3 years?
yeah, my
Poor
doctor
thing.
took a deep dive semester into bipolar. And so she, for some reason, thought that she was, a master at.
I mean, it's so like, I couldn't tell you why. Like, I've spent, when I tell you years, Googling and trying to understand like what actually goes on in the brain that no one knows. Like, it's not, you cannot find any information on it because people don't know, which is wild to me, scary to me. I, I don't know. I can see why that contributes to like stigma or people not wanting to believe it's real, right? And like trying other things, but like, and again, like, I don't care, do you? I prefer to not struggle as much. So I'm going to do what I want to do, right? But I also am like, don't, my psychiatrist now is like, maybe we should put something else into the mix because I do have the like psychotic features and I do like have the delusions and I hear things and I've been known to see things and happens not very frequently, but it does happen. So like that's one of the things we've been talking about. And I'm like, I would rather not. Like I know the things that trigger that and even myself, like I'm on medication, but I'm like the least amount possible, please, because I have also been on things that like sedated me. Like, and this is another interesting part of my life too. So when I first was diagnosed, he put me on like a ton of stuff. Um, and I was on Seroquel, which if anyone who's listening has taken Seroquel, if you know, that thing is nothing has made my brain more quiet, but I also slept for like 16 hours a day when I was on it. It was so bad. And you have to be on a lot for it to like actually be at therapeutic level. Um, and so I was working, it was my first real job out of college. I was working at a tech company and on their sales. It was like my first sales role, kind of like started my whole career in tech. And I was showing up to work at like 1 p.m. every day. Like every day. I would sleep and I would show up, I'd make like $6,000 in like 4 hours and I'd go home. Like I actually was more successful doing the least amount of hours possible and it pissed everyone off. I was like I went from being loved by everyone in the office to like everyone fucking hating my guts because I would show up so late to work, never get in trouble. I'd still make more money than all of them. And like looking back, that's so classic manifestor. Like
That's
how do I get this in my life now where I'm working 15-hour days and I want to cry every day? Um but I also was like, I have to tell these people because they must think I'm a drug addict. Like they must think. And no one's saying anything to me because I'm producing. So how are you going to argue with me? But at the same time, it's embarrassing. And like I do the walk of shame in the office every day. So I finally told them um what was going on. And they like obviously were so good to me. But um like so I've definitely been on things where I the zombie feeling um happens and it sucks. And I think that is maybe where my like belief of it's both mental illness and manifestor, or is it just how I can temper my human design like in an artificial way to make it more livable in a world that's not built for me? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. But
Uh,
that's a great way or a great question. I mean, because the world isn't built for us. They don't understand us. And when I'm looking at my ADHD, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm an emotional manifestor with a defined root, which means I'm going to procrastinate shit. It's just the way it is. And then if I'm not in the mood, I'm not going to do it. And then I'm a right mind, right brain. So it's like, yeah, we can look at my design and we can point and say, oh, well, this could be ADHD. But I'm also, and I have been for this full year, I still haven't fucking found clarity, but there has been a part of me that's like, is it time to go back on them?
Mm.
Because there is like right now I'm back in school. I'm going to school to go have to prove to the world that I've worked with HR for the past decade, but I don't have that little piece of paper that says I know how to do it. So I'm going
Oh,
back
annoying.
to school to get my HR degree. And it's like the stress of, for me, it's what I've come to is that it's like, there's a part of me that needs to trust myself. And then there's a part of me that doesn't trust myself. And so
Mm.
like when I got to the exams, on my last exam, I had a panic attack and I was freaking the fuck out because I was like, I don't understand the question. I don't understand how I'm going to do this in 5 hours. But then at the end of the day, I got C's on all my exams. I haven't been in school for over a decade and more, so it's like, this is not normal for me to be writing academical papers and all the shit that they want you to do to
Yeah.
prove it. But I was like, okay, so maybe I can do it. But again, this is not medical advice to anybody, right? This is just us talking about our experiences. But there is a part of me still that's just like, it might be easier if I go back on the Ritalin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I was
And
running a restaurant and a nightclub, I really didn't need didn't need
right.
Ritalin. That was fine.
Right. And I think that's like so I think either way, right? Does it make it easier? Yes. If you choose the easier path, like that's still just as good as not choosing the easier path. Like I think and again, going back to even that brings in the whole idea of differentiation. Like we're all allowed to make our own choices, right? What we shouldn't do is shame other people for the choices that we make. Um,
Hallelujah.
you can do whatever you want. The second you shame me for me doing what I want, that's when I have a problem with you. Or well, you shame anyone, not even just me. Um, yeah, I think yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I could really I I wish I had a psychology degree so I could talk about it. Like, I don't know. If I could go back in time, right? What would I do? Maybe I would study psychology and go down this whole path. But like I feel like most people who are psychologists also are crazy in their own right. And that's kind of like why you choose to study it.
Yes.
Most therapists also have a therapist.
They better. They better.
I don't know. I think my hope is that in the future, right, for the quote unquote community, which still feels so disjointed. And I think that I came from the astrology tarot world, right, into human design, and that was such a loving space. So when I entered into the human design community, I was like, "Ooh, everyone's kind of mean here." Um, people like no one no one is really that supportive of each other unless there's something deeper going on. Um, my hope is just that like we can get that part of the community going somewhere, or that more people feel comfortable to show up in their own way and share their own perspective. Um, but I know it can be hard because I've done it so many times and then it's always turned into like, this is why you're wrong. And then I'm not the one, right? Like the second you tell me this is why I'm wrong, don't ever expect a productive conversation. It's not gonna, I'm not interested, right? Like, and I'm not gonna just like be quiet about it. I will engage with you about it, and it usually never goes well um, for the person that started it. And my hope is just that, like, if that happens, right, there's plenty of things that I see where I'm like, nope, that's wrong. I just take my thumb and I scroll up and I just move the fuck on. And my hope is that in all aspects, human design, mental health, physical health, right? Like we can all just scroll if we don't agree, as long as we're not harming anyone. That is always my caveat. Like as long as your choice is not harmful to other people, live your best life and scroll on if you see someone doing the same thing that you don't agree with.
Mm. I feel like that is a very nice, like,
That's all I have to say about that.
right. I'm feeling really good about this conversation, Catherine. I so much enjoyed both listening to your stories and hearing you share, and I appreciate it. I believe this is going to be really impactful for a lot of people. And I feel like we've come to a nice end, but I also want to ask, is there anything you want to add to this conversation or anything you want to?
No, I think this was, I feel the same way. And I also feel like I maybe incoherently rambled a bit. So I do hope that it was digestible and understandable. Like I said, definitely am in a, since we're having the open mental health conversation, like I'm in an off period. So like and that was part of my impetus for like still wanting to show up today is like, that's something I'm working on right now. Like in my own world, it's like, okay, this is where you are right now. And like being open and honest about where you are right now and advocating for yourself and wherever you are right now, instead of like shying away and like waiting to show back up when you're like in the perfect. I'm not an emotional authority, but it feels very emotional wavy, right? I actually haven't looked at the transits. I might be emotionally defined, and that's why I'm in an off period. I have no idea. I don't look at that stuff anymore, which is something I used to do obsessively. Now I'm just like, meh,
Yeah, same.
I'm not going to attach. This isn't how I normally feel, so I'm not going to hold on to it. Like, you know, um, but no, I definitely, no, I have nothing to add other than like, if anyone takes anything away from this, I just hope that I can empower someone enough to just like show up and be their authentic self, because the world is so full of people that are not being their authentic selves under the guise of being their authentic selves. Um, and I just like, if everything is a puzzle, right? Like there's nothing more annoying than having a complete puzzle with one missing piece. And like I feel like a lot of our problems could be fixed if everyone just assumed the piece that they were created to be instead of trying to fit somewhere else.
Beautiful. How can people get in contact with you and can they work with you? Do you have any offerings?
No. That course I mentioned is still for sale. So if you like are curious, I just don't promote it. Because I just don't identify with the whole light worker thing anymore. And I'm gonna redo it at some point. But no, I'm really into being a human right now. I just generally don't have the time to do anything. I think about it all the time. I start things and then I get clients and then I am like, why the fuck did I do this? And I refund everyone their money. So, no, you can't. You can find me on Instagram, the Ego Manifestor. You can find me on TikTok under the same name. I don't talk about human design really on TikTok. I want to, but I don't. I occasionally show up on Instagram, but that's where you can find me. And I make no promises, but I'll be there eventually.
I love it. I love the aloofness, jumping up and down, back and forth, but also the absolute importance of just being a fucking human, right?
Yeah.
Not everything has to be about business. And
No, I'm kind of like into the idea of being a human design blogger. Like I've been thinking about that. I'm like, how can I just externalize all the things that like make me me so that people can see it in real life? And like that's what I like to talk about too. So if you follow me on Instagram, it's usually like me sharing videos of like my favorite examples of certain aspects of human design, and I just like talk about that um when I feel like talking about it. Be prepared for a lot of music.
I was gonna say, you want to be inspired to find new music. Hello.
My special interest is musicians, I suppose, and human design. I'm like fascinated by that. So be prepared for a lot of that. But other than that, I just really am all about living my life and sharing what I want to share. And I've been thinking about like, what does a human design blog look like? Because I don't want it to be teaching, even though I feel like I, line six, like naturally I'm a teacher, but I don't want the responsibility of showing up and being like, this is what gate 5 means, and this is what being a manifestor is. I just want to like live stream me playing The Sims for hours because that's my little Shores special thing I do when I feel like an identity shift coming on. I create like a sim and live like vicariously through the sim and like work out my own internal bullshit, and then I don't touch it again for 6 months. Anyway.
Love that so much. Well, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It has been an absolute joy and pleasure to have you here and just get to know you better and talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.